Okay, we're going to talk about wind components here and how to calculate headwind and crosswind for a takeoff or landing. So I've got runways 2 and 20 shown here. North is always going to be at the top of our page or our sheet. And we're going to throw some winds in here and figure out exactly how much headwind and crosswind we've got for a takeoff or for a landing. So let's just throw some winds in here. Let's say the winds are out of 040 at 20. And so to help visualize that, we got to think, well, north is there. We've got runway 2, which corresponds to 020, and 20, which corresponds to 200. Where would these winds be coming out of? Well, they're out of 040, which would be the northeast, so something like this. And so if that's the case, then we've got a favored runway of runway 2. So we would take off and land in that direction. So what we need to do here is figure out how much of this wind is a headwind and how much of it would be a crosswind for takeoff or landing here. And we're going to use our charts to do that. So before I even go to the chart here, one thing we need to determine is the angle between our runway and the wind direction. So the runway extends out 020, the winds are coming from a 040, and what's the difference there? That difference is 20 degrees. So we need that information. So we got a 20-degree difference between runway direction and wind direction, and the winds are at 20 knots. So we have everything we need to figure out the headwind and crosswind components. We're going to go to page 3 of our performance packets and use the headwind crosswind components table. This is a diamond chart. There are all kinds of formats of this. And so I'm going to demonstrate how we use this. We always are going to start at the 0 here and go outward. And a couple of things to take note of early are the arcs as well as the lines. You see the straight lines extending out. They represent the difference in the runway direction and wind direction. So we've got 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 30, and so forth. And then we have the velocity arcs. So there's a 10 arc, 20 arc, 30, and so forth. So all we need to do is find the line that corresponds to our scenario. So we're starting always at 0. We had a 20-degree difference in the runway direction and the wind velocity. So we're going to use this 20-degree line, if I could draw it straight there. And we're just going to go out on that line until we hit our velocity. So if you remember, the velocity was 20 knots. So we're going to extend out, and this is going to be our spot. So it's the 20-degree difference at 20 knots. And then we can use our plotters to see just how much headwind and just how much crosswind this is going to be. So if we can line the plotter up on top of our chart to where the 20 intersects the 20 essentially, we can now see it's going to be about 18 or 19 knots of headwind, mostly headwind, and we see about 7 knots or so of crosswind for that example.